How much do your expectations change, though? Like, coming out of that game, are you now suddenly disappointed if the Panthers don't make the playoffs?
Super Bowl or bust, let's go, right?
We did have a caller use the word Super Bowl during Monday Sound-Off.
We did. That is a fact.
I'm seeing some already like Andy Dalton is the guy, maybe the guy for next year. After one game, I'm already – you can bet, like now you can take your time finding your quarterback because we have Andy Dalton locked and loaded for the next 2 years. One game. Realistically, how much does one game change? Realistically, one game against Vegas, who Vegas showed some signs of life. Don't get me wrong. They beat the Ravens. They've done some things, but let's not pretend like coming into the year you looked at Vegas's roster and went, "Hoo boy, look at this." Antonio Pierce already had to come out this week and say, Minshew is still the starter. And I don't know how many teams that are that good that after 3 weeks are already having to do the we're showing faith in our guy quarterback competitions. Realistically, how much does that game change? I'm not talking about your disposition. Be more happy. If it went from 0 to 100 as far as how much you're enjoying football as a Panther fan, that's fine. Right? The despair or hope that you feel at a tailgate before a game, if you went from 0 to 100, that's fine. But I'm talking about the realistic setting of expectations, right? Because too high expectations, they're the thief of joy. If you go into a season with, if the Panthers don't win 12 games and make the playoffs, I'm going to be distraught, you're signing yourself up to be distraught. Realistically, how much does one game change? Listen, week 3 basically for me just negated weeks 1 and 2. Because I had this team preseason as a 5 or 6 win team. The number was set at 5.5 by most sports books. Some you saw at 4.5. And I said, yeah, that's a pretty good number.
I said 6.
Yeah, it's a pretty good number. I mean, we can't pick 5.5. That would have been lovely. So 5 or 6, if you're anywhere in that range, if you were the most optimistic fan and you said 7, I wouldn't have faulted you for it. If you were the most pessimistic fan, you said 3 or 4, I wouldn't have faulted you for it. 5 or 6, I believe, was the sweet spot in the preseason. After games 1 and 2, 1 and 2 were equally as bad as week 3 was good. After games 1 and 2, I thought this was a first overall pick team. I was telling Panther fans, you might want to start clearing your Saturdays and watching a quarterback each week. I want to catch Georgia and Carson Beck this week. Want to watch Shedeur Sanders that week, Quinn Ewers this week. Because I thought you were going to have the number 1, maybe number 2 overall pick, and you'd be shopping in the quarterback aisle again. So now after week 3, in which Andy Dalton goes in there, provides the spark, in which Deontay Johnson has his best career game as a receiver, yardage-wise, when Chuba Hubbard looks like the running back he was under Steve Wilkes. Now I think you're back to a 5 or 6 win team, which I get is frustrating. I completely understand it's frustrating. But it's right where you started. And guess what? Last year, I went back and looked at the standings. Last year, 5 or 6 wins gets you the 5th or 6th pick. You're the 5th or 6th worst team in the NFL, which is a massive jump. It is a more than doubling of your win total from last year. It is an improvement in the roster. It is something to build on for Dave Canales. It is overall pretty darn good. But don't get, Dennis puts out these videos of Panthers fans drinking the Kool-Aid. Don't drink the Panthers Kool-Aid so much that you set yourself up to be recklessly sad if they go on a 3-game losing streak. Here's the other thing that I think it does to change your expectations. Right? Realistically, changes your expectations in this way. I think you can expect not to be embarrassed. And that may sound like a small thing, but there were points in time last year, if you lost by 2 or 3 scores, if you were not competitive in the entire game, it almost felt like that's what you should have expected. Like, oh, you're surprised by that? The better team beat you by a bunch? Oh, you're surprised? Like, what did you expect? We have a year and more of expectations of the better teams beat you by a bunch. So now I think that goes away. I think you're allowed to be livid if you lose by 20. And allowed is the wrong word. Like you're like going to punish you. I don't mean
permission.
allowed.
You have permission to be upset.
I mean, like, you can realistically, the expectations are fair that if you get smoked after seeing what they put on the field in week 3, if you get smoked, fury is an appropriate response, a proportional response. Which, I mean, I just want to remind everybody where things started. I want to remind everybody where you were last year. I don't want to make a 33-7 lead in the fourth quarter in week 3 operate as a fence, big privacy fence that keeps you from looking at what was in the recent past. Because the other thing that it would allow you to do is you're playing the Bengals this week. Now imagine week 3 was as bad as weeks 1 and 2. Imagine Dave Canales didn't change the quarterback. Imagine Dave Canales kept Bryce Young in there and the same snowball of filth and anger kept growing. And then you're playing the Bengals in week 4. And you lost by 7. There would be a decent amount of smiles. There would be a decent amount of, hey, that wasn't that bad. Hey, you know what? They showed signs. They were in it in the 4th. What if you just led in the 4th? And then Joe Burrow led a game-winning 2-minute drill. You'd be like, hey, that stunk. That stung.
We were right there.
But we were right there. We can build off of that. Like, don't rob yourself of that either. And I'm not saying be happy if they lose. I'm saying if you win by 1, hey, you win by 1. That's as much of a celebration as winning by 30. Because the like Andy Dalton, awesome. Looked like, the Peyton Brady out there on like a combination of all your favorite quarterbacks. He looked great. Accuracy, processing, everything. Really enjoy it. I don't think that's the new bar for how well Andy Dalton is going to play. Unless he is unlike anything we have ever seen in NFL football, right? It's the guy that suddenly becomes the MVP at age 36, 37 after sitting a few years, it doesn't really happen like that.
Maybe he's this year's Joe Flacco.
From last year.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe. Joe Flacco had a nice little run.
Exactly.
Joe Flacco had a nice little run. I think that's like the top. That's the pipe dream. That's the fever dream. Right? I actually know it. The real fever dream is probably like Rich Gannon with the Raiders. But even that was 33, 34 he took over and then, won an MVP the second year that he took over. This is 4 years in the future even for that. Joe Flacco, what did he give us? Like 8 or 9 great, pretty good games last year?
Yeah.
You get 8 or 9 pretty good games out of Andy Dalton from this point forward, and then, whatever the math ends up being on that, 5 or 6, replacement level games, I think I'd take that to the bank right now. I just don't know. I don't know if that's how the expectations are actually going with the Panthers right now. I think some are starting to build the red rifle statue outside, and this is what saves everything. They're still a team that was dead last in the NFL last year. They're still a team that 6 wins is a tripling of their wins last year. Still a team that if they're not drafting in the top 10 is awesome. You borderline have a parade for that.
Hey, only 1 game out of first.
Only 1 game out of, but I know you're saying that a little tongue in cheek, or are you like,
only 1 game out of first. This isn't the college football playoffs. Style points do not matter.
But now if you're suddenly expecting to win the division.
I'm not.
Exactly. Then it's like 1 game out of first is great. I actually like that, right? You're in the mix. Your division isn't the best anymore. They were playing really good early on. Week 3, the entire division came back down to earth other than the Panthers. Fair. If you think now all of a sudden is the time to start going, Dave Canales should, look at it. He really should win the darn division. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at you and go, there's a good chance you're going to be very disappointed. You want to set yourself up for that? Go right ahead, but don't say I didn't warn you.